So on this channel, we talk a lot about security and, really going at things from the offensive side. But one thing that we don't talk a whole lot about, at least up until this point, is, what is currently happening in the security space. Things move really fast in security. Like I've mentioned many times on this channel, there's constantly new technologies coming out, and with that brings new vulnerabilities. And even with the existing technology out there, new vulnerabilities are always being discovered. So a lot can change in a day, in a week, certainly in a month in this realm. So I really want to help keep you guys up to speed on some of the latest attacks. And so if you are aspiring in security, maybe not even necessarily the offensive space, you need to, it really helps to know what is going on, what is the most recent stuff happening in this area. So let's dive into a few interesting news articles here, and we can sort of step through them. So this one was pretty interesting that I found on a misconfigured Docker servers under attack by Xanthi malware. Now you hear all the time different strains of malware coming out. A lot of times there'll be a strain, and this is what we would refer to here, how they name all the malware, and that you might see this malware elsewhere as well. So this particular one was seen by exploiting misconfigurations in the Docker APIs. So this is like a common thing, right? You have this technology, maybe it's Docker, maybe it's some other technology. That technology in and of itself may not be vulnerable. I'm sure Docker can be, certainly Docker can be configured in a secure way, and I'm sure by default it is secured. But a lot of people, they change the configuration for various reasons. Maybe they want to access a certain functionality or set things up a certain way, not realizing that they're introducing vulnerabilities into their environment. And so that seems to be the case here. If you misconfigure, you set up your Docker API in an insecure manner, it can be hacked by this crypto mining botnet. And so essentially what they're doing is, this misconfiguration here, I'm assuming, must lead to some kind of like code execution or something like that, right? Or being able to remotely load stuff, right? And this article really goes in, details it, and even shows like where this is, where the vulnerable instances are. Generally, a lot of people use Docker in the U.S., of course. So maybe that's part of why that's going on. But yeah, this stuff can tie in with ransomware and stuff. And this one, instead of ransomware here, what they're doing is they're actually loading a Monero crypto miner onto the target system, and they're using that to mine Monero. Now, the reason that this is pretty common nowadays, we've been seeing in this space, is a lot of people, a lot of attackers are using Monero, like mining Monero, installing Monero miners, because any computer, can mine Monero, same way as any computer can mine Bitcoin. The thing is, Bitcoin is a public ledger, so all of the transactions are completely public, completely visible. So to add that extra layer of security so no one can, will make it more difficult for forensics guys to trace it back to them, pretty much impossible to trace it back to them on the cryptocurrency side of the house. If they leave other fingerprints on the system somewhere in their malware where it can be traced back, that's a different story. But as far as the cryptocurrency part is concerned, you can't trace it back to them if they're using Monero, because the use case for Monero, actually, which if you're not aware, Monero is another cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, except it is a security token currency, basically. So the whole point of Monero is anonymous transactions. So you can't tell who the currency was sent to. So it makes it pretty much impossible to trace it back to them, from a crypto standpoint. So yeah, this is something we've been seeing a lot lately with the Monero crypto miners on not ransomware, but malware. But this really illustrates, how things can be misconfigured, and just because you're using software that is secure out of the package, if you will, doesn't mean that you can't configure it to make yourself vulnerable. So even especially if you're on the IT sort of admin side, definitely something to take note of. And even if you're an offensive guy like me, something to look for in your pen test, right? So this one was pretty interesting. Android Messenger apps leaking photos and videos. There's a particular app they call out here, Go SMS Pro app, which I haven't heard of this one, but apparently it's quite popular. 100 million downloads on this thing. Sharing stolen images from the servers, right? So here's the thing you got to keep in mind with apps, right? And this is one of those things that it kind of comes down to your risk tolerance, your risk appetite, if you will. How secure, how much out of your way do you want to go to try to be more and more secure? And understanding that no matter what, you will never be 100% secure. That's not possible, right? And so, you know, a lot of us have many apps on our smartphones. Pretty much everyone has a smartphone now in 2020, and we have a lot of apps on our phones, right? And on those apps, we do various things, like maybe we upload photos, maybe we, share any kind of information, right? That has to be stored a lot of times somewhere other than your phone. Think about, something like Facebook. People upload photos to that. Of course, that's completely public on there. But, apparently this app sends multimedia messages, right? This is a SMS app, right? So if you think about something like Line or WhatsApp or something like that, right? Where you also send multimedia messages and receive it and stuff like that. This stuff is sent somewhere, right? Now here, there's a particular exploit on this that it doesn't even require authentication. So basically, they were able to get access to all these images and multimedia stuff they were sharing on the app. So that's just something to be aware of when you're downloading and using these apps. Just know that down the line, there may be some security issue discovered in these apps that, don't assume for a second that your information is only going to go to your recipient. Down the line, it could be exploited and other people could have access to that stuff. So just keep in mind when you're taking pictures, sending photos and all that stuff. And then use your own risk appetite to judge whether you don't even want to use the app at all or if you could live with it, right? So this one was an interesting one. IoT chip maker Advantech hit with a $14 million ransom demand. Ransomware, man, you hear that everywhere. It's really big. It's been big, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Attackers have been very profitable using this type of malware here. So I've covered ransomware quite a while ago on this channel, but a little recap is, a lot of people probably haven't seen that video. Ransomware is essentially a form of malware where it uses encryption to encrypt all the files on your system, and only the attacker has the private key that you use to decrypt it. So with that being said, the attacker holds the victim ransom, basically. They say, unless you pay me X amount of money or Monero or Bitcoin, a lot of times, normally Monero nowadays, right? Because everyone that knows crypto knows that Bitcoin is highly traceable, right? So unless you pay me this much Monero or whatever, then you won't have access to your system, and only they have the key to decrypt it. And once you give them the money, you don't know if they're they could just not decrypt your stuff. Now, typically, lately, they have been decrypting people's stuff and giving them access back to their stuff. However, the reason they're doing that is because they know that if they didn't follow through with that part in the future, these companies would be less likely to pay them the money, right? So that's why they're doing it. And it really puts people in a tricky situation, right? Especially when a lot of governments have been targeted by this. And it's like, think about critical, government operations and stuff like that, government websites, government technology, or, companies that if they don't have access to their stuff, they could go under, right? So it puts them in a tough spot, and a lot of these companies have been sort of bending the knee and paying the ransom, and then that just further encourages them. So that's why this has been around. Look, yeah, Bitcoin is another popular one as well. Now, I'm sure they have their ways of making it a little bit harder to trace them, but the more sophisticated, like the better, the stronger, more secure way to do it would be Monero, no doubt. But yeah, you can read all about this. This has been like a huge thing lately. And I've even seen it come from using social engineering to get people to, like, even targeted spear phishing on government officials, because government officials, if you think about it, now I know that's not the case with this particular article, but just saying a lot of government officials, their information is completely public out there, so people can easily look at that data, that public data, and really target a very crafted email that looks legit, talking about their hobbies or impersonating someone they know, and then they send them a link thinking it's from them. They click on it, and then this spreads to all the systems on their network, and they get hit with this ransomware, right? So it's really sophisticated. It's not, they're not playing a kiddie game anymore. They really have this down pat now. So this has been a huge issue and continues to be so. Another one interesting along the ransomware route was this one, backups. I found this interesting because I used to be a backup and recovery administrator. And I know one of the things that they say is a lot of attackers, going for the backups often is more lucrative than, a lot of people think that, backups, well, I guess in this article, people are saying that, backups won't save you. That's true. A lot of times, these ransomware attacks, I've seen them, they've actually taken down the backups as well. So really, companies are trying to figure out what the best strategy against this type of attack is. I think that, I've definitely heard of some companies going for offline vaults, completely offline replication. But that's a tricky thing to develop and maintain as well. So, companies, and especially for smaller budget companies, the one I was speaking of was a Fortune 10 company. I won't say the name of it, but, for smaller companies like startups, that's not really a feasible solution. So, potential money-making opportunity for any of you guys that have an idea of how they could solve that issue. But, yeah, this continues to be a big issue here. So a lot of people are talking about antivirus, firewalls, and all that stuff. That's great and all. But even that is not foolproof, right? You should see some of these social engineering attacks. No amount of antivirus can stop a... Well, here's the thing about antivirus, right? It really depends. There's multiple... I don't really want to drive into this rabbit hole too much, but there's multiple kinds. There's some that check based on signature, and there's some that try to predict malware dynamically based off the behavior. That's what they really need to push more, because these sophisticated ransomware attacks, they're developing their own payloads, right? So there's nothing with a known signature. They're not using Metasploit. They're not using MSF Venom to generate their payloads, right? They're custom generating it. So there's no known signature, because most of the antivirus matches against a known signature. So, yeah, it can help a lot, especially the dynamic kind, but even that is still far from perfect. And then the firewalls and endpoints, kind of similar thing there. It can help a lot, but yeah, there still needs to be something else done about this, I feel. The password thing, yeah, I really hate passwords. Honestly, passwords feel like they're just... such an archaic thing, right? We've had so many advances in technology, yet we continue to use passwords, right? Passwords are the most just flawed system that there is, because if you think about it, people need to, people are going to create passwords that they can remember, right? And even the people that aren't, right? People are going to reuse passwords. No one's going to use a million different complex passwords for everything. They wouldn't remember it, for one thing. So they're going to use like password managers, which with that, right, you have one master password to your password manager. So it's like, yeah, password managers help, and I use one myself, but it's still it's a flawed system, right? there needs to be a better way of authentication, and people are still figuring that out as well. But it's kind of crazy in the 2020, as far as we've advanced in other areas, that's one thing that we couldn't figure out how to improve upon yet. But yeah, that's all I was going to say about that one. And this was kind of interesting, right? We're talking about phishing emails, and how they're getting more expertly framed, right? Looking really legitimate. And, you know, my dad is big into QuickBooks. He uses that a lot, so that's why I found this kind of interesting. But if any of you guys use QuickBooks, definitely be on the lookout for a phishing email, and really just verify that it's coming from Microsoft and not a spoofed one. Now, that's something that is really tricky if it's expertly framed, right? So I don't do anything that gives away you're putting in your information or something, right? I would be very hesitant with that. But yeah, I'll link the articles if you guys want to do some additional research on this stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to get you guys acclimated with what's going on in the space. And I may make some similar videos. Let me know what you guys think of these down in the comment section below. I love to take you guys' feedback into account. And definitely feel free to subscribe to the channel for more security content and like the video if you enjoyed it. And I will see you guys in the next one.